even though I think we've got the best equipment possible, thanks to the Chapel Hill Library, I can see that it is a complex process. Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas to all who celebrate one or both. We're right in the middle of Hanukkah. I don't think we have any guests today. Among the loyal members. This is a very challenging time for Jewish people all over the world. On the morning of October the 7th, my husband and I had packed our car to the gills and we were driving to Hilton Head, South Carolina to meet our grandchildren and children for a week at the beach. So all the way down there, we listened to the bad news all day and it got worse and worse. And I kept thinking about the October War because the Yom Kippur War, because my parents were in Jerusalem on that day in 1973, on Yom Kippur in 1973. They were in the old city. They had taken a walk because there was no public transportation and there was nothing open, and they decided to take a walk. And they heard sirens, but that was not that unusual on their trip to Israel. But a woman came out of her home and gestured for them to come in, and with a mixture of Yiddish and English told them, no, this wasn't a drill, this was the real thing. By the time they got back to their hotel, their return flight to the United States had already been arranged for, and they probably lost 3 or 4 days of their trip. And because news then didn't travel so fast, by the time I realized what was going on, they were back in Philadelphia. But it was a horrible experience, and for them and for Israel and for me. But what I really thought about on October the 7th were my grandparents, all of whom left the Pale of Settlement before 1910. And especially after 1903, when some of the worst of the pogroms, the Kishinev pogrom, and there was one in Odessa, there were several pogroms. And my grandparents had all left during that time, and they had all come to Philadelphia. And their sons, many of their sons, fought in World War II against the Nazis who had executed Kristallnacht and all the horrors of the Nazis. And here were the people living in Israel, also descendants of people who had fled pogroms in the Pale of Settlement, experiencing another pogrom. And I couldn't believe that the cycle was repeating itself. I guess I should have known Jewish history, but I just couldn't believe it. A bad situation right now, and I hope that it gets better soon for everyone in Israel and the Jews around the world. Having said that, we have a program today which is about artifacts of our Jewish past. I wanted to introduce some new members, the Rabois. Is that correct?
No.
No.
Silvers. I don't see the Rob Boys here. It's
Oh,
Ed.
okay.
Last week.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Everybody, I guess, will get a chance to introduce themselves when they're showing off their
Okay.
family
Very good.
artifacts.
So we're going to turn the program over to Stephen Friedman, who is going to guide us through this tour of our family. Oh, Dave Zendel.
Steve, hang on just one
Yeah.
second, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. Just wanted to remind you about the meeting coming up. The next one will be February 11th. Don't know if it'll be hybrid or not. Depends on whether this room is available, whether people want to meet over at the Homewood Suites instead. Well, that is one of the problems of Zoom. Let me make sure that everybody is muted. There we go. You can unmute yourself, but you're muted now. At any rate, also just a couple of notes about about today in the library. Obviously, this room is free, believe it or not, with all this technology. We just had to pay for the coffee. The library does want us to make sure that we clean up after ourselves and that we're out of here by 3. Also, you all have goodie bags that are related to the topic that Steve is going to be sharing with us, plus something for the ladies or the men who like earrings. They are family earrings, and if you didn't, family tree earrings, if you didn't get a bag, let me know. I'll make sure that you have one. Our door prizes, which we're going to lottery off, Barbara will decide when to do that. Are in the back, and by the way, there are 4 really expensive door prizes back there, including family tree software, family tree maker software, Roots Magic software, charting companion software, and a subscription to Family Tree magazine. So I think those are probably going to go fast, but we'll see about that. Also wanted to share with you from David, I do have the budget, or not the budget, but rather our financial statement, and we have money, and I think that's the most important thing to know. We're hoping that everybody will, of course, renew his or her dues. It's hard for me to look at 2024 and do the programming because I'm back and forth to Chicago so much, but again, we'll try to do a mix and have more meetings, hybrid or otherwise over 2024. We'll see how it goes. Steve, sorry to have taken away a little bit of your thunder, but it's all you
Debbie,
now.
thank you so much. Barbara, thank you so much. It's great to see everybody today. This is a great organization, and I'm so happy to be part of the organization. I came from Ohio. My wife and I moved from Ohio about 2016 or 17, and I'm glad I was involved with the Columbus Jewish Historical Society. I'm still a member there from Columbus, Ohio, my birthplace. So it's great that there is a Triangle Jewish Genealogical Society. I want to talk about artifacts, mementos, family treasures. I started my genealogy research back when I was 12 years old. My father died at age 46 of a heart attack very suddenly. And I didn't know anything about the Friedman family, my surname, my dad's father's family. I knew all the other 7 great-grandparents. Everybody has 8 great-grandparents, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
8?
Yes.
Okay, so I knew, yeah. So anyway, but on my mom's side, and I'm gonna start, I know I don't want to dwell on me on this during this presentation or this interaction, but I want to share with you something I'm very, very I'm very fortunate to have, and my brothers, my 3 older brothers and I, we come from through my mother, her grandfather, my grandmother's brother, or my grandmother's father was born in a town called Trachenbrod. Well, Trachenbrod is the fictional town that was part of the book Everything is Illuminated, the movie Everything is Illuminated. Jonathan Safran Foer. It's a wonderful book. It's a wonderful movie. You're welcome to borrow. Just let me know. But my great-grandfather was born in that town and lived in that town up until 1911. But he wrote a memoir about the shtetl, Trachenbrod, my town went Trachenbrod. And actually, Jonathan's family has a lot of landsmen. There's about 500 of us that are connected as landsmen or descendants from this town. But David Schwartz, my great-grandfather, my middle name is David, and actually his name was Duvid. That was his name in Europe. Duvid left there in about 1912. He went to Columbus, Ohio, where some other relatives were already living. This is written in Yiddish and then translated in English. And my great-grandfather talks about his grandparents in this booklet, this memoir. And we're so fortunate. And I just want to read you, I think I already showed you the picture of my great-grandparents. He was a tanner in the old country that we come from. We had a tannery in Trachenbrod, our family. And that's what he did. He followed that path when he came to the United States, and he was in the hide and fur business in Columbus, Ohio. But he dedicates this book, his memoirs of Trachenbrod, to his parents, his brothers and sisters, and to all the Jews of Trachenbrod who were not given Jewish rights of burial. This was a town, a shtetl, that was burned by the Nazis. The Nazis came in about 1942 and burned the town to the ground. And so I have some other things I'm happy to talk to you afterwards about. And I also want to share real quick, this is a picture from Trochenbrod, from the, yeah, because this was Poland. Shtetl was Poland, now it's Ukraine. But this is my grandmother's brother who came to Columbus, Ohio as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old. And David Schwartz, my great-grandfather's brother, Muttel, from the very famous yeshiva called Slobodka. And Harry Schwartz, age 10 years old, that was my great uncle, my grandmother's brother, and Uncle Muttel, my great-grandfather's brother. This was taken at Slobodka, and Muttel became a communist and was, what does it say? Was killed in the counter-revolution of 1919. But this is the old type of photographs, the thick cardboard. But this was taken in 1910 or 1909, and we're so lucky to have it. Was it's actually imprinted down the photography studio, and it says Kovna on it. I actually need to find out what that is. I'm just looking at that right now. But anyway, yeah, I'm so fortunate to have these treasures, these mementos, the memoirs. And this is what inspired me when Dad died when I was 12 to look into the roots of the Friedman family, my dad's father's family, because I knew nothing and found relatives and family. And I'll tell you later all about that. But anyway, we're going to get into the sharing and telling. And I know we talked about a limit of 5 minutes. I probably have gone 7 minutes myself, but we don't want you to miss telling what you need to tell. So it's not like we're going to have a red light and green light like we used to have it.
Oh, but we do have that. I do have a red light and green light. And also, you know, the main document. Stephen, I've got to just comment on the Trochenbrod books.
Yes.
The popular books, they are so, any genealogist should see that movie. First of all, or read the book, everything is illuminated.
Yeah.
But nothing was really illuminated for Jonathan in real life. And that's why he wrote the novel. His first trip to Trochenbrod, he was so inexperienced and unprepared. He found nothing. So nothing was illuminated. He wrote the book, and then everything started to open up where other people from other descendants from Trochenbrod shared. And that fellow who wrote the book about Trochenbrod, that Let the Heavens Be Empty.
He just passed away a few months ago.
You know that. That's another terrific book.
Oh, it is. Thank you. Yeah, it is.
And what an amazing town that was.
Yeah, and the map, real quick, and I don't
Yeah.
want to take
Yeah.
up too much time with the map today. You know, that's where Trochenbrod is. I don't know if you can see that, but
It
that's
was
where it
a
is today.
very sophisticated town, and
Yeah.
it was, and the reason that Jonathan missed it was completely gone,
Yes.
just like a road
Right.
and nothing else left, as I recall.
So real quick, so Avram Ben David, who wrote this book, it was really published about 12 years ago. So in here, like right here, this is the word, this is actual quotes from great-grandfather's book. He asked us for permission. Of course, we gave it permission to
Okay.
use. So
Very cool.
anyway, I'm happy to share this with you. And let us start. We're going to start with Lauren.
No, start with Mark.
Mark, we're going to start Margaret's sister. So you have maybe you brought something together?
Well, we have,
Please.
I don't want to get into it. We have very little family, and we've been trying for years. But this is our father. And he graduated from Cooper Union, 1940,
Mhm.
from the Night School of Engineering. And unfortunately, we just don't have anything because of many reasons. And maybe next time we'll have, unless you want to speak more. On my father's side, there is stuff on my mother's side, but another part of the family already did that. But we're more interested in my father's side and his father, and nobody can find him. But maybe next time I'll have some more luck. Margaret?
Yeah, just to say that, we had a very close relationship with our father.
And we're very proud of him because he was raised by a single mother. And if any of you know what Cooper Union is, it's probably the third or fourth best engineering school in the United States. And up until recently, it was 100% free if you got in. It was very difficult, also for the arts. But he became an engineer after dropping out of high school and going to school at night, and then going to Cooper Union at night and graduating, as Lauren said, in 1940. But we cannot find anything about his father. And this has been going on for years and it belongs to him. And it's very frustrating. And there's no one left in the family
Nobody.
who
Not a
even
soul.
knew our father. So
Very
it's
sad.
a tough thing. And so maybe,
Next time.
right, we
We'll
have some more information.
Yeah. That's it for us.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret and Lauren,
That's it.
sisters.
Yeah.
We hope.
That's great.
You've got the
Glad you're-
DNA test, right? I mean.
I'm waiting actually, the ancestry, that's holding us up. They said about 2 more weeks.
Cause my sister wanted to do a DNA test.
Yes.
But I got the results, you know, but
Okay.
she didn't want to handle it. And I
Oh,
called her
okay.
up and I said, I got really bad news.
Oh.
You are my sister. And then, of course, her results came in 99.9% Ashkenazi
Oh.
Jew, and I was only 99%. She's been lording that over me ever since.
Al,
Funny.
So what I did was, it kind of occurred to me, this is a picture of my mom, early 30s, okay?
Okay.
Very fuzzy, black and white. Story behind my mom was, she came to the United States in 1921, okay, from a place in what's now Belarus, was Poland, called Pinsk. And it came at the height of pogroms and all kinds of things. Her father came to the United States much earlier. She didn't know her birthday. She asked her mom, and her mom said, "You were born on the second day of Shavuos."
Sure.
And she said, "Your father left while I was pregnant with you in the United States." He may have not even known, okay? So I never heard that part of the story. So that was very interesting. So my mom said she went to a Hebrew Jewish calendar, English calendar, and she looked it up and it turned out to be May 20th. Okay?
Yeah.
And everybody believed that it was 1910 until. So we could never find my grandfather's immigration record, where he lived. Very strange. It was when the ancestry or somebody put on what are those records, naturalization records, that I found it, and there it was, and done it when his whole family was already here, as my mother listed, wrong birthday, my aunt listed, wrong birthday, my uncles listed, wrong, he just made them up. So I went based on that, and I started looking again, got curious about it, and I couldn't find it, but the record said he came on the steamship Neckar in 1907.
Mhm.
Excuse me, 1907.
Long pregnancy.
So I go to the Neckar, okay, to that landing, and I look and I look, I'm looking for a Moshe Begun. All right, you know, like Menachem Begun, okay? Moshe Begun. Can't find anything close. There is a Harsha Bellum. And he's going to the address we know him, he'll be living in. So it was a mistyping by, I guess, the agents there. So that's true. My mother was born on May 20th, 1907. And her father did leave when his wife was pregnant with her. This is a picture of her. I just want to get into a little AI for you. When you take a fuzzy picture like this and you do a little handiwork, you come up with this.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That is,
Okay,
that's.
the background's been removed, it's
Yeah.
been sharpened, and it's been
Mhm.
colorized.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, it really is beautiful.
Wow.
I need to come over to your house
Do that?
sometime.
Did you do that through Ancestry?
Jeez.
No, I did not do this, I did this through, My Heritage.
Okay,
okay,
yeah.
yes.
And additional software to remove the backgrounds, okay? Okay? They're a little expensive, and there are other engines around now that do almost as good a job. So that's the story of my mom. You know, I made 2 of these on glass, and I sent one to my brother, and he's got it sitting on the mantle.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's great.
So thank you for letting me share it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate that. You're bringing up one quick item, and you all probably already know this. It's so important to write on the back of all your photographs.
Damn right, yes.
Because if my great aunt Sarah Schwartz hadn't written this, I would not have known all the information relating to this
Yeah.
1910 photo. Anyway, please.
You're gonna go, right?
Oh, by the way, May 20th, 1907 falls on the second day of Shavuos.
Just my chance.
Exactly.
Well, but if you thought it was 1910 or 19,
Who knows? Maybe she had an effective
All
copy.
right.
this is a samovar,
Wow.
which these maternal grandparents brought to the US. And the story about this samovar is Lee's grandmother's baby brother was married to a woman, Sarah Diamond, who we loved. She's Aunt Sarah. And when she came into the family, she kind of had heard about the fact that a samovar had come with the parents. And
It came with my great grandparents. not with grand-
your great, yes.
You said grandparents.
No, had come with the parents of her husband,
Oh,
who
okay.
was your.
We can play the tape later to show.
Yeah, you're right, so. And she tracked it down and found it in the coal basement of one of his grandmother's brothers, and basically rescued it
Oh.
literally out of the coal.
Could you explain what it is? You called it a.
It's samovar. It's to make tea. It's Russian.
Oh,
And then, because I don't have a whole lot else to say about this, I'll just say that they came, we finally figured out, from a town named Belize, which is on the eastern border of Vitebsk. I don't even know how to say these things, but it's currently in Russia proper, but it was sort of right on the eastern edge of the Pale of Settlement. And Belize was the site of a blood libel. A child was murdered in 1823 on Easter Sunday. And this unbelievable story came out of all of this. But in 2018, a professor wrote a book called The Belize Affair, Blood Libel in a Russian Town. And I just finally found something about Belize. It's really hard to find anything. And lo and behold, well, the murder happened in 1823. The whole thing was not concluded until 1835, 12 years later. The story's kind of unbelievable. There were 2,000 Jews in this town. It was a town of slightly under 7,000 people. And eventually all the charges were dismissed. Although a few years before the charges being dismissed, there were penalties placed on people until they finally decided to dismiss it for total lack of evidence. It was a crazy story. But in the meantime, 43 Jews in the town were imprisoned for years. And it turns out in the book, I found his great-grandfather, his grandmother's father, was named Lazar Zaretsky, and one of the 43 Jews in the town who was imprisoned was Lazar Zaretsky. And that Lazar was born around 1771 from the information I have in the book. And his great-grandfather was born in 1872. So maybe a great-grandfather or a grandfather. But I just thought it was fascinating. And now I'm trying to track down if I can find any records from Belize. And I've actually contacted the little, they have a little museum in that town. And they actually wrote back to me and told me they don't have anything. There's nothing in the town. And I'm trying to track down some of, they said the records could have been sent to some of the like the major towns, so I'm trying to track it down.
I'd like to add, just to follow up on your remark about writing on the back of things. So she mentioned Zaretsky, who were people we didn't know anything about. But in my grandmother's papers, my paternal grandmother's papers, Ava found a sheet, and on the back of it, it had 2 addresses and names on it. And she tracked down that the Zaretskys in New York were
2 brothers.
2 brothers.
That we knew nothing.
We knew nothing about them, and we've met one, now descendants, we've met one of their descendants, and we've talked online with another one, which all came from Ava looking at these addresses that were written on a scrap of paper, and Ava wondering, why did my grandmother keep this little scrap of paper? And that's how she found the Zaretskys.
Throw out any scraps.
That-
of
that-
paper.
But
Yeah.
he has done such an amazing job on his family.
Yeah, but based on like nothing.
I know.
Because he didn't even mention that they were never known as Zaretsky in this country. They changed their name to Sachs when they got here, and it took a long time to figure out what the name was. So,
Thank you, Ava.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for sharing. Barbara?
We have a samovar in our dining room that looks very much like this one, that the
Before you start, how do you spell that word, son?
Samovar. Samovar. It's the classic Russian way to make tea. You fill up the water, and ours had a
There's coals that go in the
tea,
back.
yeah, and ours had a teapot that sat up here.
We have a teapot, but we don't think it's the original.
So we didn't
Exactly
bring
the
it.
same, exactly. The teapot I never put out because it doesn't really go.
I might have missed this already. How old is that? How old-
well, I mean,
Approximately?
they came around the turn of the century. We have no idea how
So
old
it's
it is.
it's at least 125 years old. It's probably older.
But you can see how beat up it is.
It was
because-
in the coal bin.
This is a photograph of my father-in-law, Ed Friedman, the baby in this picture. And my father-in-law was born in 1914, so this picture is about 1914, 1915. I knew my father-in-law extremely well. He lived into his 90s. He was a physician, very outgoing, energetic guy. This is his father, who came to this country as Yussel Arbus. But on the manifest, you can see written below Yussel Arbus, it says Joseph Friedman, with what I call the Irish spelling of Friedman, Freedman. But he chose that name. We don't know why he chose Friedman. We don't know why he didn't want Arbus unless somebody had told him it just didn't sound American. And I think this generation wanted to sound American. Arbus in Russian means melon. Maybe he just wanted to get away from the name that, but we don't know. And I can't find out anything about the Arbus family. His wife was named Markov, Luba Markov. They came to the United States from Bielotserkva in Ukraine, but censuses and other things list Yussel Arbus as being from Bialystok, which kind of makes sense. He became a tailor, and Bialystok was a city with a lot of manufacturing of clothing, a lot of sewing. So it kind of makes sense. He was colorblind, however, so he was a colorblind tailor. This family had 6 boys and 1 girl. They were extremely argumentative. They lived in one of Philadelphia's classic row houses, tiny row house. There was yelling and screaming. Yussel and Luba, his wife, never learned English. So when my husband would go to his grandparents, he didn't understand a word of what was going on, but he could tell it wasn't very pleasant. They were very religious, particularly observing kashrut strenuously. My mother-in-law once put a spoon in the wrong drawer. And his wife Luba went out and buried that spoon in the backyard. When my husband was 20 years old, he discovered that there was a son that he didn't know anything about, a son named Sam, his father's brother named Sam, who had been shunned by the family, theoretically because he'd married a first cousin. But as we all know, that wasn't so unusual. And I think there was a family feud between Luba and her brother, Max Markov.
Unlikely.
And so that was why he was in trouble, because he married somebody from them. The other thing my father never knew until I started doing genealogy work about 15 years ago was that Luba Markov Friedman had a brother in Philadelphia and about 5 or 6 children and many, many, many cousins who he knew nothing about. And there was a fabulous Markov website that I found on the interwebs all about the Markov family. And I don't think my husband has recovered yet from finding out that his sister didn't speak to a brother who lived 5 miles from her.
Yeah.
So I think there are probably a lot of family stories like that that we don't know so much about, or maybe we do. We try not to think about in doing our genealogy research. I met a cousin here in Chapel Hill whose grandfather had cheated my grandfather in business.
Wow.
And she didn't know anything about it, but in my family, it's legend. And when I told her about it, I tried to tell her in the nicest possible way. She said, you know what? I'm really not surprised. Because he had kind of a reputation for that. So, but I think this is so interesting. This is Bakelite, which is
Oh, beautiful.
one of the earliest plastics.
Yeah.
The other place you'll see Bakelite pictures like this is on tombstones in
Yes.
Jewish cemeteries. Many, many from the 20s and 30s have pictures like this. And we tend to think it's not a Jewish thing to put a picture on a monument. But in that era, it's very common. And we have a lot of
Yeah.
Russian families at Hebrew Cemetery.
Yeah, they do that.
And they do this,
Yeah.
to this day. But anyway, this is Bakelite. Read about Bakelite.
Bakelite, B-A-K-E.
Bakelite, that's the brand name. And read about it in Wikipedia. It's very interesting. But think how well this has been preserved.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
1915.
It's amazing.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
so much.
I'm gonna just go ahead and stand right over here, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
it's a good space.
I think everybody knows that I'm the daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, and I don't have anything from the old country on my mother's side. My father was a little bit luckier because he had an aunt who married somebody who wasn't Jewish, and she saved quite a bit of my dad's photographs, and I've been able to reconstruct his side of the family tree in those photographs. But on my mother's side, only 1 photograph from the family. However, right after the war, right after liberation, my mother started to keep a diary, but it was an unusual one because she didn't write in it every day. She wrote in it once a year on the day that her parents were murdered in Auschwitz. And she kept that up until the day she died. The diary was written in a number of languages: Yiddish, German, Hebrew, and Polish. So I had a heck of a time getting it translated. I came across my mother's diary. Actually, my sister was aware of it, and she said, we ought to get this thing translated. It took a long time. I thought I would read just 1 page, because these entries were not very long. What I did was I went on Shutterfly and I created a book for my daughter and my nieces and for my sister, and illustrated it with pictures as, best I could of things that would be relevant. But I think you can hear the theme of survivor guilt in this passage. She always wrote to her mother, and occasionally her sister Blumka. My mother had 6 brothers and sisters, grandparents, very large extended family, and she believed to the day that she died that she was the sole survivor. I found out otherwise. Her brother did survive liberation, but we don't know what happened to him. And she did have some distant cousins who I discovered in all kinds of crazy places. Sweden. Who knew? Jews in Sweden, it's like a Mel Brooks movie.
Yes, yes.
Cousins in Israel, cousins in Canada, and a cousin in Australia. So my mom did have family, she just wasn't aware of it. So she writes this entry, "Dear Mama, it's been a long time since I've written to you, but I always think of you in the factory where I work, home in bed, where I sleep. Always, but by night, so little comes back to me. Maybe because I am so tired, and when I see you in my dreams, and I see you always crying, so terrible, crying, so helpless, bitter with heavy tears, like one in the ghetto, I saw you crying. The people here, the American Jews, they don't understand and don't want to know what we have been through. They say we should forget. Forget who? You or Moniak or father, or forget all of my dear ones they killed, sisters and my brothers? I shall never forget, never. I am the only one who survived, and the memories I will cherish in my heart. Twice in my life, I had this feeling I wanted so badly with all my strength to turn the clock back, to make things different the way it used to be. The first time when Moniak was sent away with the transport, and when you were taken away from me in Auschwitz. When next day I was lying in the barracks, I cried so much, I wanted so terribly for the time to turn back. And then I know what I would do. Nobody would take you away from me. I would have been smarter. The time goes by. I am now in America. I am married. He is a good man. It's remarkable how much he resembles Moniak. It's remarkable that I still look good after the sad 6 years and only a few gray hair in my otherwise black hair. My eyes are so fast tired. I would so much like to have a baby so I could tell it everything about you. And I dream that it will be a gifted child, and that when it grows up, it will write about you, and you will live always, and the whole world would know of every pain and trouble, from hunger, from dreaming of enough bread to eat so much that we wanted, from children being taken away from their mothers and mothers from their children, from deportations in closed wagons, for hiding in basements and attics, for mothers' heartbeats when in the night we heard the German soldiers coming up the stairs, from all our suffering and our hopes that the liberation will come soon." Heartbreaking, isn't it?
Wow.
You know, just when you think you're kind of done with your family tree, something else shows up. I saw this stray line in a Jewish Gen chat about the German government opening up what are called the Hessen archives, where you can obtain information about compensation that people might have applied for. There were 40 pages of things about my mother. And one of the things, among the many things I remember about my mother, is her persistence, her desire to make things whole. From 1946, the year after liberation, she started to apply for compensation for her suffering and for her losses. And she sued the government of Germany when her compensation was first denied, and she finally got it. She didn't want the money in the sense that it would ever make her whole. She described it as blood money, but she took it because she said, what am I taking from them that they didn't take from me? And I understood that. So at any rate, I recreated the diary, and I hope that my mom would know that I'm doing the best I can to preserve her family's memory.
I think she got her wish, Debbie.
Yes.
She got her wish.
Yes.
How old was she when she wrote that entry?
That would have been before I was born, so my mom would have been, let's see, she would have been 33. Would have been around 33. Yeah. Wow.
Thank you, Deb.
I think she's right when she says American Jews could not possibly understand. One of the things from this October 7th thing is
Yeah.
nobody understands.
No,
Right.
right.
Especially for 2Gs like myself and 3Gs.
Yeah.
The re-traumatization experience. And I realize it's nobody's fault that they don't get it. But I think you also learn who your friends are. I think that's what we learned.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, enough of my going on and on.
I'm Bill. So I'm not Jewish, I'm Jewish in law. And I bonded with Debbie a long time ago, early on, looking for stuff on my grandfather, also not Jewish. Where we would go to National Archives and looking for stuff about our respective families. But anyway, because I could never find anything on that guy, and he died before I was born. I had a grandfather deficit, and when I got married, I kind of adopted my wife's grandfather.
Oh,
And, you know, we would go fishing and, I would listen for hours to his fascinating stories about his Holocaust, escapes, and, you know, I mean, that was like, it was a story that's unlike so many other stories in that they, you know, they started out in Belgium, they were right after the invasion. You know, nice Belgian people helped them. And they wound up having a lot of narrow escapes going all the way through France and, you know, with my mother-in-law, who was at the time 7, you know, eventually walking across the Pyrenees, you know, but it was a fascinating story. And the guy, he was so interesting. You know, the story stretched back to the Russian Revolution, you know, on his way, you know, where he left Russia to go west and was going to, I guess, Venezuela, but got waylaid in Belgium. And then, you know, they decided that it was okay to stay in Belgium, well, for a while until 1940. But anyway, I guess so, you know, so back when, in the 90s, this was a very important family heirloom. It's my mother-in-law's Usham tape, where she had done her Holocaust survival story for Steven Spielberg's project.
yes.
And, you know, at the time, these things were really hard to come by. Now you can just Google the name on the internet and you watch it on the internet, but.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Barry and Barbara Silver. You're up.
Oh, wow. Okay. These are my great grandparents. And their names are written on the back. Courtesy of my mother. Thank you, Mom. I did not know who these people were, but I'm named after this woman, Beulah. I always knew I was named after someone with a B in the family. That's all I knew. They came to the United States and are buried in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is where I grew up. And the story of my great-grandparents actually was my first real genealogical success. They had 6 children. And one of them was my grandfather, who was, I'm gonna put this down because of my trimmer. And they left their oldest child, Judah, in Theophil, Ukraine, because they left a business there when they came to the United States, and he didn't want to leave. And he had 6 children also. And my grandfather's brother, their oldest son, was murdered in front of his 6 children in 1920 in Theophil. And my grandfather paid for and brought the children to live in Terre Haute, Indiana. I never knew this. And one day I was looking for I just started researching, and my grandfather was named Hyman Schultz. And I started looking, and somebody else was looking for Hyman Schultz. What? Why would, I knew who my cousins were, I thought. And I found out that one of the 6 children had a child who was doing genealogical research. So that was he became an interesting second cousin. And I found a whole group of people through that and found out about this family that was annihilated in the Ukraine. Of the 6 children, There were 5 boys and 1 girl. 1 girl died in a sanitarium. She was 5 years old when her parents were murdered in front of her, and she lived in a sanitarium in Indianapolis for a while, but she never recovered. And the others scattered all around, but didn't stay connected to my grandfather's family. So we didn't know anything. All my cousins, I had 13 cousins in Terre Haute. None of us knew anything about these people, so it was kind of cool. So that was my first success.
Thank you for sharing, Barbara.
Can I ask a question? Do you know how they landed, how they ended up in Terre Haute?
Yes. My grandfather came with one of his brothers to St. Louis, and he was a traveling peddler. And Terre Haute, Indiana was a thriving metropolis, had 2 synagogues and a kosher butcher and blah, 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 and 3 hours by car. I don't know how long by horse and buggy to east of St. Louis, or east of St. Louis. So that's how he ended up in Terre Haute. And all of his siblings ended up coming to Terre Haute. My grandfather was a very good businessman. And so he was kind of like
Did they have a dry goods store?
yes,
What was the
Schultz
name of
and
it?
Company.
And was his last name Schultz?
Yes, it was.
Judah Schultz? Judah?
Judah Schultz was the one who was murdered.
Oh.
My grandfather was Hyman, Abraham, Gertie, Bessie. I'm missing
So the
one.
proprietor of the dry goods store, his name was?
Hyman.
Hyman Schultz.
Hyman Schultz, my grandfather. My grandfather and
And what year, yeah, well, I'm just curious, because I love the business stories. So what year did that store was in business until what year?
Oh,
About-
whoa.
about-
it was started in the like the early teens.
Started in the early teens, and when
Yeah.
did it close?
80s?
Oh, wow.
I think it was probably the 80s.
Yeah.
Very successful for a number of
Did it
years.
stayed in the family all the way, or did they?
Oh, you bet. It was
Schultz's and
very
Terre
much a
Haute in
family
Terre Haute,
thing.
Indiana. Okay.
Yes, very much a family thing.
Okay.
My father worked in the store, all my uncles, my cousins, I worked in the store.
Did,
It's a thing.
I don't want to be negative. Did anybody in the town call it the Jew store?
Absolutely. It was the Jew store along with 2 other Jew stores on the main street of Terre Haute. And
Yes. Come sit down, please.
yeah, there were a
Okay.
lot of Jewish businesses
Okay.
in that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, all those towns, yeah, Indiana, Muncie and Fort Wayne and
Well, Terre Haute,
Marion, Indiana,
yeah, Terre Haute was, it's about,
Evansville. I'm sorry.
it's on the way between, if you think of a line between St. Louis
Yeah.
and Indianapolis, it's right in there. And it's about 3 hours south of Chicago.
Did anybody go to East St. Louis to live
Oh,
of your family?
I have a tremendous amount of family in St. Louis. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk afterwards. Connect you there. All right, thank you.
All the
All right.
Kavinsky's.
Yeah,
are-
I'm Linda,
Linda?
Oh, yeah.
and I really appreciate everyone sharing their stories, and part of it, everyone's story rings with part of my family story. So that's really a very special experience. My grandfather was born in Pinsk in 1905. I didn't bring anything to show, but I have his original passport, which he got issued shortly before he immigrated in 1925. But the picture of him on it is from when he was 12 years old. So I guess pictures were such a rare commodity. And also, like you shared, when he came through Ellis Island in 1925, they asked him when was his birthday. And he only knew on the Jewish calendar. So he said spring. So they said, okay, May 15th. I wish we had more information than that. So in Pinsk, he was born Isaac Solodovnik. In Ellis Island, he came through as Isidore Solit. And any Solit is a relative since it's a made-up name and no one else has it. And then to Americanize, I guess somewhere around the time he met my grandmother in the early 1930s, he became Irving Solit. So he was the oldest of 4 boys, and he immigrated when he was 19. His mother was pregnant every time his father came home from the war. You know, he'd get conscripted into the service, the father, and keep her pregnant. And so from the time my grandfather was 10, he supported his family. And the way he avoided the Cossacks taking him to be in the service is he would hide in the woods. And from the time he was 10, he did something that he was standing in water into his waist in the river. But with family lore, that's all the detail I got. The 3rd child was taken in by a Christian family because the family couldn't afford to feed all 4 children, and then was reunited. He immigrated with his parents, but it was a big decision. Do you stay with the Christian family? Do you go back with your family? So he always had relationships, this great uncle, with both. My grandfather immigrated in 1925, and I know he sent back money for everyone else to come.
Yeah, I'm curious because in 1924, the federal government basically shut off immigration. And
Yeah.
the trickle that came through were the lucky ones. And, you know, we don't want these dirty immigrants coming in, you know.
Yeah, and I
Nothing new
last
there.
time when you did your presentation, I showed you, I should have printed the passport or emailed it to Debbie. And he went through, I think, Amsterdam, so I don't know if that helped him.
Well, that's because you mentioned that one child lived with a Christian family. I was curious whether they had come in and posed as a Christian. The family took them in because they couldn't get past immigration.
My Uncle Lou may have, but, yeah.
Did he come through New York?
Yeah, they all came through Ellis Island. And I was always told my grandfather was about 1819, so he was born in 1905. I found the ship. I have to get my future project is to get on paper all the stuff that's family lore. And, yeah. And so trying to think anything else. Oh, the first day my grandfather came through Ellis Island, he got a job, which he talked very little about anything that happened in Pinsk because it was too sad. You know, and everything I know from my mom. And he lived to 1985, so I knew him very well. And he said he came through Ellis Island, and the first day he was there, he got a job. He was riding the subway, and someone was reading a paper in Yiddish. So he said, "Where's the jobs?" So he was always resourceful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Stephen, I think Dave Zendel's has I'm sorry.
Oh, we still have a
2.
couple more people
Two, are you?
here. Yeah.
Go ahead. Your first name? What's your first name?
Oh, I'm Michelle.
Michelle.
Okay, okay, so I read the email like 10 minutes before I came here that I was supposed to bring something, so I just very quickly.
Thank you,
brought-
Michelle, for letting me know my emails are read.
I read the top part of it, but the meeting, I wrote down what to bring. So,
I know now I have to put the good stuff at the very top, right?
always someone. So I brought something that sparked my interest in genealogies from when I was a kid, I'm maybe 10 or so. It was, I don't know, how many people are familiar with this book called All the Kind Family, and if you're not, then get familiar with it because it's the absolute best child's book about the Eastern European Jewish experience in the Lower East Side.
It's a whole
Series. This is the first one.
What's the name?
It's called All the Kind Family. It's by Sydney Taylor. And the story is based on her family. She's one of 5 girls and then 2 boys after. Sydney's the middle girl. So when I read this when I was a kid, they were a little bit more well-off than my family, but one of the chapters they go to, this takes place in the first book is in 1912. She goes to the market with her family, with her mom and her sisters, to prepare for Sabbath. And the market is on Rivington Street. And that's where my grandmother lived, on Rivington Street. So I was all excited. Wow, like this is, yeah, connection. So that was what sparked my interest. I probably, as you can see, have read this book. Yes, hundreds, like literally best children's book about Jewish Lower East Side. So my grandmother was about the same age. She was born in 1899. She came from a town called Kippel, which is in Ukraine now, but was in Russia. And she came here in 1903. So she was 3 years old and she grew up on the Lower East Side, as did my mother. And I didn't bring a photo, but I pulled one up on here, which is really small. But this is when she was in school in the Lower East Side. It's super cute
Michelle, why don't
picture.
you email it to me and I'll put it up on the
Okay,
screen.
okay, it's really cute, very bad shape. But that's what sparked my interest in genealogy, and I have done a lot of research, have found every ship manifest from, pretty much every relative that came over, and she and my grandfather were from the same town, but my grandfather came over much later in 1921, actually. So yeah, that's what sparked my interest. And one more thing I'll say is if you have New York City roots, and I don't know if you're familiar with, in 1940, they did the city did a project on taking photos of every single building in the city. And I went through, you can get it, there's a few sites, but it's in the Library of Congress website. And then there's another site where it's like supposedly easier to pull down the photos. But I went through and looked up every address, there were many that my grandmother lived at and my grandfather and other relatives, and was able to pull up pictures in 1940 of these buildings. So, and add them into my family tree on Ancestry. It's really neat to see them. And then also this summer I went back, took a trip to New York City and went and found which ones are still standing and was able to take pictures there too. So that's just
Manhattan, or was it you?
it's
flew
all
around?
5 boroughs. It's
Great.
an
I have-
amazing resource, and
The Library of Congress, well.
yeah, or you can just do New York City 1940 tax record, and if you just do a Google search, it should come up. I think they also did something in the 80s, but that was of less interest to me. 1940.
I've Googled addresses and they've come up sometimes.
Wow.
Really
Yeah.
cool.
One of the Zaretsky's were on Rivington Street.
Oh, really? I'm 129, I think.
Rivington, is it Rivington? Like, all right.
That was amazing.
It was a big
Yeah.
street.
Yeah. Lower East Side.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yep,
Thank you for Sue.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sue.
I brought a picture of my grandparents and my mother and my aunt with their menorah, lighting the candles. And that menorah, I have memories of it. We went we visited my grandparents every Sunday. And on Hanukkah, all the cousins would line up and we would get $5 from Grandpa.
Wow. It's a lot of
And then
money.
we would light the menorah, and there was one little holder that was bent. It didn't sit with the rest of them. And it looks like in this picture that it's the same one. So I'm thinking he probably brought this with him when he came over, or maybe it was my grandmother's, I don't know. But, when I had a project last year of going through all the family photos, and none of them were, none had any names on it, but I knew a lot of the people.
Yeah.
And those that I didn't know,
Yep.
when I found a second cousin
Yeah.
online, through Ancestry, I would send them a picture.
Yep.
Do you know these people? And some of them did. I have one of my second cousins who I've known. I wrote to her and I said, this woman has been in every single picture. Do you know her? And it was her grandmother, my grandmother's sister. And she's the one she's the only one on that side of the family that I have found a naturalization application for. So I'm hoping to find out where grandma came from.
You will.
I don't know.
Naturalization papers, you know.
It's supposed to be on there.
It's supposed to be, I don't know.
I know.
I'm supposed to find her on a manifest somewhere, but I think she, oh, thank you, I appreciate it. The story was that she was a stowaway, so.
Sure.
So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But this was a really wonderful memory, and when you asked for.
In what year would you say that is approximately?
I would say it was the mid-30s because my mother and father got married in 1937. And this looks like it's before that. So I would say 1934, 35.
And there are special plastic, non-acid, blah, 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 ways to preserve photographs. So be careful, because like, I don't know how you brought it today, but of course, and I'm not criticizing,
Scan it.
you don't want to lose it.
I bought albums.
And scan it too.
Yeah, I
Scan everything you
yeah,
can.
I've scanned some
That's right.
pictures, but I also bought some albums from Gallery Leather in Maine. And they have, well, it's supposed to be like acid proof or whatever they call it, you know? So, hopefully they'll remain, you know, like, and, you know, it's for me. I want to pass it on to my son, but, you know, they do
Sometimes
everything digitally. He doesn't want my pictures, you know, so.
Feldman,
We'll see. Feldblum.
Feldblum. Do you live in Chapel Hill?
Yes,
Do you live across from Richard and Jane?
I do.
Good.
I had dinner with them the other night.
See how?
Ed, did you bring something to share?
I'm friends with them, but I'll talk to you afterwards.
Dan, how about you? Did you
So
bring something
funny.
to share?
I had dinner with them on Friday night.
They're wonderful.
Ed, I know you've done a lot of work and you've gotten a wonderful book out, but
Thank you.
Ed isn't gonna share today, but Stan, I'm gonna get the camera over to your neck of the woods, just so the people who are far away from us can see you and hear you a little bit better. There we go. Whoa. There we go.
Yeah, that is.
I'm Stan Roboy. When COVID hit, you know, most everybody was really sad and they're gonna be at home for a while. I was thinking, what a terrific opportunity, because one of the things I wanted to do was understand more of my family history. And I thought to have, what I thought was gonna be 3 months, turns out to be, what, 1.5 years or 2 years, to spend full-time working on the history was fascinating. So I took the documents that I had, and today, with all the computer tools and the databases and things that you get into that just were impossible before, I started. So I knew already a good part of the family, but something that happened just over and over again, I would call somebody out of the blue and, you know, tell them we're cousins, and the first reaction is, you want my credit card number? And after you know, talk with them several times and you give them enough names that they know nobody's ever gonna have that. Then they start to talk, and I would always ask someone, do you have any old pictures? Because I had none. And it was amazing when you start speaking with you know, tens or literally several hundred people, everybody has 1 or 2 old pictures. And a common response that I got was, I have a family picture, and there would be 8 or 10 people, and they would say, I know most of these people, but there are 2 or 3 that I don't know. And I look at the picture, there's my father. And there were pictures I had never seen before. My father came over in 1910. He was 17. There were no pictures in existence at all. And yet, different people had it. So for the first time, I saw pictures of my aunts and uncles that I just had never seen as young people. So out of that came this. This is the book that I published at the end of the year and a half.
Oh, my goodness,
So-
big time.
It's almost 500 pages long. And
Can you read the title to us? Because it's,
Yeah.
might need a translation for some.
The Life and Times of John Raboy.
And
And you do?
Oh, and his Mishpucha.
Mishpachah is, yeah.
And I'll pass around, people can take a look at it. But what was really incredible were the stories that I was able to find. And by the way, nobody had anything organized. People would have letters. And one of the biggest surprises was a letter my father wrote in 1953 to a cousin that was in Maine, hoping that someday when I grew up, I'd be the family historian. I mean, it's really interesting to read 50 years later what your parents hope that you will do. And so anyways, there were just incredible stories and relatives that I had no idea who they were, some famous, some infamous, but there were certain stories that stood out. One in particular was a cousin who was on the front line in World War I. And either he shot somebody or somebody else was shot at the same time. And what struck him was the person who cried out, who's somewhere in the battlefield, was crying out in Yiddish. And, you know, my father and all these people were in the Ukraine. And so the first reaction from this cousin was, you can kill an enemy, but you may not kill your brother. And so at nighttime, under the penalty of death if he was caught, he somehow got some food and whatever little medicines you can. And remember, that's 100 years ago. There's not medicines like today. Penicillin and that didn't exist. So it was pretty primitive. He went out to the battlefield, found the fellow, and he was still alive. He was the enemy. And so my cousin took him back to his enemy lines, and they both knew if they were caught, they'd both be shot. He got him back, and then he got back to his place. And the theme was, you can kill an enemy, but you may not kill your brother. And that is a theme that's throughout this book. People are asking what it is to be Jewish. And there was one incredible story also where one of the cousins, her uncle, who wasn't Jewish, was living in Denmark. And he was very incensed, that the war was going on. He and his friends they were the organizers that smuggled out the 5,000 Jews to safety. And so you start reading these stories and you just try to imagine here are ordinary people. And in fact, there was a wonderful tale that came afterwards when I went into it. One of the big Hollywood firms wanted to make a movie of this whole rescue. And so he actually came over and met with the executives. And then at the end, he turned it down. Why? He said the story was wonderful. He wanted to see this done, but they demanded that if this movie is made, it has to be palatable for an American audience, which means there has to be a love affair. And instead of having his wife involved in this, and she was so instrumental, there would have to be another woman and there'd be a love affair. So that would make it a kosher story. And, as you go through the book, there's just so many stories like this. Yes.
I have a question. That's remarkable. So those stories that are in that book, do they relate to one side of your family?
Yes, just one side.
Wait, so what side is it? You might have already said it.
Yeah, my father's side. My mother's side is a whole nother story.
So your mother and father?
No,
Your father's,
just
okay,
my
your father's,
Just my father's family.
it's your father's family or your father's mother's too?
No, my father, mostly my father's father.
Okay.
So, but once you get back, 100 years ago, the one thing I realized, and I found very quickly, is you talk of who are the relatives. Well, you suddenly realize, if you go back a generation, or let's go back 10 generations, someone has 10 children, and they send their children out to get married. So they're 10, 20, 50 miles away.
Yeah.
Those 10 children get married, they have children, they have 10 children. They all come back to the same shtetls. So by the time you're down 5, 6 generations, you have a person who's simultaneously your first, second, third, and fourth cousin. It's all related.
Very nice.
So that's the
When
fun.
he got out of Denmark, did he leave on a boat?
Pardon?
Did he leave on a boat?
He didn't swim.
My grandmother.
Just the boat?
Gosh.
No, a little bit bigger. He came over in a boat to Magenta.
This
Cuba.
boat was used to smuggle Jews out of Denmark,
Oh,
and it still exists. It's been rebuilt.
No, there's actually one story my father actually relates, the entire trip from when he left Ukraine, getting up to first to Lvov, getting up to Hamburg, getting to London, all, you know, all the funny things that happened there. And then steerage back over to the United States. And that wasn't even very simple either, but they're just fun with the stories.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Looks beautiful.
So we're go, Karen, do you have a story to, an artifact also, and David? So, we have about,
It's 2:20.
Actually,
we're in good shape.
I should just add one thing.
Okay.
In doing this whole ancestry, turns out, who's my cousin? We haven't figured out the link yet, but he's right there. Lee's mother, it comes across that Lee's mother and I are third
It's a
cousins.
pretty long chain, but yes.
Oh,
We haven't figured out.
Generations back.
Mother is related to everybody. Every Jew in Europe, she's.
it must seem like that way.
David, can you hear us?
David?
David, are you there?
I'm here. I see you unmuted me.
Yes, and can you go ahead and share your screen?
I thought it was being shared.
Well, it has to be shared from your side.
Uh,
You remember how to find that button?
Yeah. I hope. Share screen.
Yes.
I don't remember where.
Remember, cursor all the way down to the bottom of your
Yeah.
screen very slowly, and that tray of icons will pop up. And while David is searching for that, I'm gonna ask someone to take this little box around, and everybody's gonna pull out a pink card, sight unseen. Nobody can look at the numbers. But, or we can just pass it around, whatever works best. Barbara? David, any luck yet?
Not yet.
Okay, while you're, searching, Karen, would you mind coming on, unmuting? And, David, we'll come back to you in a little bit. I'm gonna mute you until you find that button. Karen, on to you.
Okay, we'll see if you can see this or not. What I have are linens, and I don't think you can see it. On the linen, you can see the letters HH. And then this is one linen napkin. And then here I have a whole bunch of napkins. There's like, I don't know, 20 maybe in here. And then I have this linen, and inside it, since it's hard to see, there's an MM embroidered. So my great grandfather was a linen manufacturer in Mönchengladbach, Germany. So my great grandmother is the MM, is Margaret Mendel's. And so she embroidered her MM on her tablecloth, which I have. Her daughter is my grandmother, Hilda Hertzberger. So she embroidered the HH on, on her linens. This is in Germany. So my great grandfather was the linen manufacturer until Kristallnacht, and he had to sell his manufacturing plant because that's what you did. My grandmother at the time was a young adult, and she got a letter asking her to marry someone. So she was able to come to the US in order to get married to my grandfather. And that's how she came across to the United States. Then because she was here and she was the daughter, they could ship all of the important things to her. So they shipped the linens, they shipped, the different things, the silver, stuff like that. And then she was able to get her brother. You guys are all talking about huge families. My families have always been teeny. So it was just two kids, my grandmother and my uncle.
But it's neat to have the linens with the HH and with the MM on them. It's kind of old. I'm not quite sure what to do with them. I have them. A bunch of the cousins have some because there was so many. So it's kind of neat. I'll stop and give it to David now.
Looks like he's gonna steal it from you anyway.
You see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen. Hang on just one second, David. Karen, you said that your family had to sell the linen business. It was, I'm sure they sold it for a lot less than what it was worth because it was going to be confiscated, right?
Right. So I don't know the details, but I know, yes, they had to sell it, just like their house was taken from them. So their house, it's like a mansion house. My parents visited it, I think probably in 1980s. And then two of my cousins and I visited the house, I think in 2019. And it was neat to see it, but now it's a lawyer firm and never any compensation for the house or for the business or any of that.
I don't know if you heard me say that the Hessen archives are now open. And this is the archive that has all of the paperwork about people who did file for compensation. And if your family didn't, that doesn't mean it's too late.
It does for the house, from what I've heard, because they've shut it down. And for me, growing up, in the 70s and whatever, hearing grandma talk about things and my uncle talk about stuff, it was really scary to send the Germans your information about where you lived. So they knew that was the time to send in the requests and all that. But it's like, why are we telling the Germans where we live now? So it was just kind of spooky. So I don't believe, now grandma did get like the old age pension. She did get that. So somehow they had information. But my understanding is that they've never been compensated for the linen factory or the home. And my mom even tried earlier too, and nothing came of it.
There's a wonderful documentary, not well known, made just in the last couple of years, called Reckonings. And it's all about how the German government, the Israeli government, the American government got together and tried to figure out some kind of reparations. It was extremely political. The Germans didn't want to do it, but they also had to face the prospect of becoming part of the League of Nations again, to be perceived in a more positive way. And that's why, if you're wondering why there are so many Mercedes-Benz in Israel, part of the deal that Israel would never forget or forgive, but there would be some kind of economic partnership where Germany promised to support the state of Israel financially as long as Israel was willing to import German products. It's if you want, I'd be happy to make that even just a separate TJGS meeting. We could screen that film because it is
Good idea.
it's quite a story.
Good idea.
Thank you so much, Karen. Okay, David, it's your show.
Okay, you could see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, just a little aside, the first presenter talked about their father going to Cooper Union. I graduated from Cooper Union, not in 1940, but in 1959. So a little linkage there. So Norma and I moved from our home of 50 years in Raleigh to a senior citizen facility. And we left so many things in the house. And so it was a little challenge to find an artifact, but we did find something. It's not a picture. It's not a book. It's not a samovar. It's not embroidery, but it's something interesting. You'll have to wait till the end to find out what it is. So first I wanted to verify what I'm showing is really from the family and can be considered an artifact. So my grandparents, Max and Rivka, my grandfather was born in 1869 in Lipovitz, and Rivka had 4 siblings, and one of whom was Leah. Leah married Jake Galitsky, and they had 2 children, Anne and Sarah. and they were also born in Lipovitz. In 1913, my grandparents, with their 2 daughters and 1 son, who was my father, immigrated from Lipovitz to New York City. At the same, 3 years later, my grandmother's sister, Leah, who was then married to Jake, emigrated, but they went to Canada in 1916. So I knew I had relatives in Canada. So gotta go to the next slide. In 1933, my parents got married and they went to Niagara Falls, and they also went to Canada. And they took a lot of pictures of the relatives in Canada. And there was Jake with his wife Leah and their daughters Anne and Sally. And so they got married in August of 1933. My mother I found an album of Canadian cousins with a couple of dozen pictures. And my mother was nice. She didn't identify the people, but I figured out who they were. And this is in Toronto in 1933. So I tried to find these relatives in Canada. Well, it wasn't very successful. Actually, Norma and I went to Canada in I remember being in Canada in 1953 and getting a present from the Canadian cousins. But I never was able to find these cousins. In 1991, Norma and I went to Canada. We went to Toronto and we tried to find the Cooper family, because Hy Cooper and Ann Cooper were invited to our wedding in 1959. And so when we went to Canada, I had the Cooper family, and we went to the Jewish Federation there. They didn't know anything about any Cooper family. We used the Canadian phone book, the Toronto phone book, made a lot of phone calls to Coopers, but none of them were relatives. So it was kind of a futile endeavor, and that was in 1991. Then, to my surprise and delight, in 1991, in 2011, 20 years later, I got a email from my cousin. Just so you could see what it was. So this in 2011, my cousin David Multer, who is the son of my first cousin Phoebe, was like an amateur genealogist, and he wrote his own genealogy program, and I gave him a lot of information that I had at that time. And he got this letter from somebody named Cheryl. She said, "I am a granddaughter of Leah Berdichevskaya from Lipovitz, Ukraine, who shows up on your website. How can I find out who provided the information?" And David gave Cheryl my email address. So obviously, Leah Berdichevskaya was my grandmother's sister from Lipovitz. So I knew that Cheryl was my second cousin. And that started 10 years of writing back and forth to each other. And from Cheryl, I was able to get more information about my Canadian cousins. So I found out that Cheryl's mother, Anne, married Hy Cooper. And she also told me about her first cousins, Jack and David. And Leah and Jake's daughter, Sally, married Harry Grossman, and they had 2 children, Jack and David. So these 3 people these are my second cousins. So finally in 2019, Norma and I went to Canada, and we visited with Cheryl and Hirsch, should have changed it to Hirsch. And we spent a week with them, which was delightful. And we also met a lot of the other cousins in Canada. And it also happened to be our 60th, I believe that's 60th wedding anniversary. And Cheryl and Hirsch had a big party for us on Shabbat evening, and we met a lot of the other cousins that we knew about in Canada. They didn't all show up at this party, but all these people are all my cousins and their children and grandchildren in Canada. So this is the whole Canadian mishpacha, which means family. So we added a lot of people to the family. So one of the people in this group, as I mentioned, was well, before I go to the next slide, I wanted to define what an artifact is. So I did a Google search, and it's typically a physical item that has special value to your family that was given to you by a parent or grandparent or even a cousin. Almost anything can be considered a family artifact, even clothing. So my cousin Jack Grossman, who was an attorney and also a judge, wrote a book called Decisions. And in the first chapter of the book, he talks about well, first, the gift that I received, I skipped a slide. Jack, in this book, in the first chapter, wrote about his mother's operating a family-owned haberdashery, men's haberdashery, called Lyons Menswear. And so I realized that the gift that I got when I was in Canada in 1953 came from Jack's mother's shop. And what kind of things does men's haberdashery have in those days? Men's one-piece bathing suits, which were developed in the 1920s. And so what I got from them was this bathing suit. And that's my artifact, all right? And here it is. I don't wear it anymore, but I know it's the real thing, because I went to summer camp in 1954 and 55, and my mother always sold labels into the clothing. And so I don't know if you can see this, but there's a label on here that says David Zendel's. So I know that this is something that was invented 90 years ago, and I got it 70 years ago. So
David, you still got it, David. You still, those legs, David, you still got it.
I still got it, right. It's one of the few things that I've kept. So on a more serious side, for maybe a more true artifact, going back to my grandfather, where I started this, this is a picture of my grandfather in 1953. He died a year later at the age of 85. But he always carried around a 14 karat gold watch. Was on a chain. He always had it. He always had a jacket on and a vest, and this watch was always in his pocket. So that's my. I guess I have two artifacts: a bathing suit and a gold watch. So that's it.
David, you and I need to talk because my grandfather is from Lipovitz.
Okay. What I've got other
Jacob Brodetsky. his
people
father-
from Lipovitz that
Yeah.
I did a presentation about the Shukit family. And I've got a whole tree of Shukits, but I've never been able to link them to my family. And I've been talking to a Shukit in New York, and we've been unsuccessful in finding a place where we could link our trees.
David, did you hear Barbara say that she needs to talk with you about the Lipovitz connection? She's got.
I don't know
Lipovitz.
which Barbara said that.
Barbara, I'll have to move the camera so
It's okay.
David can see you, but I can also share your emails with one another so you can connect.
Okay, please.
All right, let me just get you on camera so David can see who he's talking to.
Okay.
Am I going in the right way?
There you go, there you go.
There you go.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. Well, we're probably related.
Maybe have the same
Yeah.
smile.
Lippovitz was a town about 150 miles southeast of Kiev.
I know.
All right, Steve, do you want to wrap things up? I can tell you that this is the best Hanukkah present.
Yeah.
The program that I'm continuing to promote, and I'm actually working, I've done the Sunday schools in Columbus, Ohio, where I come from. It's being done every year with 7th graders, 8th graders, and their parents and grandparents. And I'm trying to get this all going in Raleigh area with the Sunday schools. If anybody wants to help me with that, see me afterwards. But thank you so much. I really, each of these items, each of these stories means a lot to you, to everybody. And
I just want to say, I think your idea of doing it with 7th graders or whatever is so important, because I cannot tell you how upset I am that I was too stupid to ask my grandparents questions about their lives when they could have told me all this stuff that now is hard to find. And so if we can teach kids to be interested
Yes.
and ask the questions, that's.
we'll talk afterwards, please. All right, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
So Debbie, would you do the,
Sure,
the
I'm happy to
prizes?
do the honors. I don't know if our offline virtual guests want to participate or at least watch, but who has number 1? Who has, that's you. So you get to pick first from that array of opportunities for door prizes. Remember, everybody's got a door prize. Everybody's got a wonderful calendar and some earrings.
Wouldn't want to do
Don't
this with you.
You've got 4 envelopes there with software. Oh. Who's got ticket number 2? I have 2. All right, start to cruise right behind her, Michelle.
Start your cruise.
Start to cruise. Who's got number 3?
My sister.
Okay, you're.
Oh.
Michelle. I like how I call them.
Oh, okay.
After Michelle is done and it's your turn. I know the choices are hard. And who's got number 4? Okay, Al's gonna be after Lauren. Hard choice, isn't it, Michelle? There's a teddy bear there too. Thanks for your kids. So if you haven't picked up anything for your grandkids yet, it's not too late. You got, also, for those of you who come from families who, maybe half or, one side is not Jewish, I got a Shalom Christmas stocking there as well. So not to be left out. And Al, you actually made some candles for us before the pandemic.
Did?
Yeah, those blue candles, you made those and I brought them back.
Okay.
Okay, in case
I
anybody
get to
wants
my
them.
age, sometimes you don't know.
Okay, I know, it's funny. All right.
Yeah, seems around
It's
correct.
the Schwetzer's turn.
Margaret, go ahead, Margaret.
Open up the envelope because there may be some instructions you might have to email me about how to navigate. Okay, which one did you choose, Michelle?
Well, it says a copy of Family Tree Maker, but I can't read the last word.
Oh, wow. My handwriting is terrible. Family Tree Maker software. Is that what it says?
Yes,
The instructions may be already in the envelope, I'm not sure. And Al, what was your number again?
4.
4, and who's 5? Okay, Ava, after Al is done, and who's 6? Lee, we thought that was a 6, I thought it was a 6 and not a 9, but.
Now that I know the scheme, it's definitely a 6, not
Okay,
a
all
9.
right.
Wonderful.
Okay. All right.
I got a high now.
Al is cruising, and please, while you're waiting for your number to be called, we have so much food here, it's almost a shanda.
I know.
Wisconsin belt,
I'm gonna take
right?
Yeah.
And who's number 7?
Number 7.
Okay, you have to wait until, you gotta wait until Lee.
Yes, I am. I am.
I don't have any fights to break out.
It'll become a story if I.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, that's right.
Year, do you remember?
Want to give me your email?
Let's still talk about it.
Yeah.
Did you get a number? Oh, you did. And you don't forget your little Hanukkah bell that was gift. You've got, this is it's on the subject of artifacts and it's from the Holocaust Museum. Calendar. Oh, okay. So everybody's gets something. All right, let's see. I think Steve said he's number 7, right?
Is this available?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this is the town and gown architecture of Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
It doesn't have to be about Jews.
I know, but what is it, I'm gonna take it home. What's town and gown? What is that? That's a college?
That's an expression
UNC?
that this is a town gown, town of Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. I have another town gown relationship because I have another residence in Evanston, Illinois, and that's Northwestern. Yeah, and
Okay.
you know, you might be able to give it to somebody for whom you couldn't find a gift. So there's number
Well,
7.
No, I'm not gonna give. What's that called?
You can trade them. Who's got number 8? Okay, Bill, you'll be next. You're up next. Now, Steve already picked his gift. And who's number 9 after Bill Batty?
What?
Who got number 9?
I have no idea.
Number 9.
You know.
Nobody got number 9, number 10.
Number 10.
Okay. You didn't take 2, you didn't take 2 different numbers. Okay. Okay.
That's fine, I'll work it.
Okay, after Bill is done, okay, Bill found a bear. I know that for. Okay, we've got number 10 coming up. Who's number 11? Number 11. Okay, that's Dr. Roboy. You're, as soon as these.
Have a tree up online.
Yeah. You're up
Okay,
next.
maybe you can give me that, because then I come back.
Lauren, is your last name Walter Guy?
No,
Coker last
Weinstein,
name?
Margaret Weinstein, yeah.
How do you spell Vinicor? Because I.
Stan is up there cruising for bruising.
With a K, I think.
Oh, last name?
They always pronounce
DeGangi, the married name, DeGangi, DIGANGI. Thanks. Okay, Dr. Roboy is up there with number 11, right? And after he picks something, who's number 12? Okay, Shabazz.
Bill, what is your?
Pick one of the, good for you. You might have a stamp on that. We've got 6 stamps on it.
And you go right from there to here.
Okay, Dr. Roboy, I think he's kind of centering on one, so number 12 again, Schwester.
Okay.
Remember, we got a cookbook from one of our own members, Southern Cooking from Debbie Moose, if any of you would like that. She sent that out ahead. She's married to Rob Bath. Some of you know Rob. And who's number 13? Lucky 13?
Remind me, Beth.
Did anybody get a 13? 14. Number 14. You're 13. Better get your tushy up there.
Yeah, he had his comments.
I did my own presentation there.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Be busy reading. And I do write so well.
I also want to do the algebra.
Actually, we have quite a few doctors in the room. Okay, we have number 13 up there. Who's number 14? Number 14? 14 going once. Okay, Barb is number 15.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
And do we have a 16? There we go. Ed, as soon as Barbara makes her choice.
Okay, we'll talk. I got 2 presentations.
Okay, next up.
And maybe your best.
So you don't know when they came over, or do you know approximately?
Number 17. Okay, they'll be right after Ed. You can stand right behind him.
Deb, this is the best. This is the best.
Whatever you want. I'd love to see grandchildren, see their grandparents.
Reckon.
Oh, yeah, you know, well. I don't know anything about her.
Oh, Charlie, yeah. Go ahead. Actually, you know, is it?
That's the.
Like,
That's the nature.
I don't know. Right, somebody's gotta give down.
Yeah.
If you have any issues at all, email me because I have
So you have a senior.
Oh.
And.
Charlie
was either Jewish, Italian.
I'm gonna sign you you off, okay?
You know, which seems amazing that I'm.
David.
65.
David, I'm gonna sign you off,
Yeah. I have a college class.
okay? Thank you.
Family.
Okay,
All right.
enjoyed it.
Good night, David.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Good. Bye, David, David.
Bye.